Our guest today is Patrick Keane, the CEO of Associated Content. Patrick, rather than describe the company myself, what is Associated Content?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having us. Associated Content, we think, is the web's largest open publishing platform. We have north of 300,000 individual contributors creating content, thousands and thousands of pieces of content a day. And we think we've built sort of the web's most democratic, best discoverability of content ecosystem, if you will, on the web today.
So this is basically like a huge website, but you're not employing any journalists or content creators. You're paying everybody as a freelancer. It's all coming into one system. How do people find the content? How's it organized? Do you have editors? How does that all
absolutely.
work?
We have all of the above. So of those 300,000 individuals, when I look at sort of our site and our business, the majority of those people, the users actually are coming through natural search. So about 90% of our traffic is natural search. So we create content that's very discoverable, looks very much sort of like the long tail of user information, everything from how to winterize your shed to potty training your kids to virtually any topic of any user interest. And we pay people a combination of sort of two different ways. One, an upfront payment. So some users get an upfront payment for content they create, and a combination that also includes fees for traffic. So for every 1,000 page views a piece of content generates, we pay the user $1.50. So there's a performance component and an upfront component, and it works really well for the users and it works really well for advertisers.
So as I recall, this is a company that was created by Tim Armstrong and others out of Google, basically coming at the whole search and discovery process from the opposite side to most traditional publications, which are trying to do SEO to figure out how to get their stuff into search engines. You design this with search in mind, and you're saying 90% is coming from that. Do readers have any idea where they are? Do they know Associated Content? Do they care? Does it matter at all? Or is this in fact the way that you would design a company if you were going to build it today?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I mean, Associated Content in many ways is brand agnostic. I mean, we would like more and more users to come through a front door. Again, only 10% of that traffic comes through AssociatedContent.com, but we are absolutely fine with the user landing on a page that they might have a little less familiarity with, because I think we're playing into a lot of changes in sort of user behavior today. Everyone navigates the web through search, the nichification of user interest, people relying more on blogs, people relying more on different sources of information that might not look like your traditional source of information. So we play very nicely in that reality. But I think another thing that's quite interesting, and Tim and Luke Beatty, our founder, who are good friends when they built the company, they really realized that content on the web was mostly old terrestrial content that was brought to the web that didn't take into things like keyword taxonomy, keyword density, discoverability, uniqueness, all of those things. So they really wanted to build a company where content was created for the web, specific to the web, as opposed to repurposed content from traditional media brought to the web.
And if you look at we're going to talk about Tim and AOL in another segment, but if you look at the whole continuum of content companies, you've got everybody from Wikipedia on one side, it's totally user-generated. Yep. Then there's Mahalo, which is basically human search and so forth. About.com, where humans are curating it. In that continuum, everybody's writing your stuff and so forth. Then we have the New York Times on the other side, where it's totally top-down editorial. I mean, which of those wins, ultimately, do you think?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think there's definitely a place for professionally curated, editorial-driven places for great premium content. That's not to say that we don't sit in a lens where it's a different kind of a content experience. I mean, you mentioned About.com, you mentioned Wikipedia. I think the sort of notion of crowdsourced content creation is a very interesting phenomenon because it's inexpensive to create, it's discoverable through search, and I think it plays into the realities, again, of user interests of today. In terms of who's going to win, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think there are a lot of companies today that are looking for great platforms for content discovery, content monetization, and content creation. You know, I personally think that we are the best one. There's places like Demand Media, there's places like Helium, Suite 101. There are lots of different companies that are playing in this space, but we've been at this 4 years. And what I think is also interesting, our success, we almost have our own laboratory of success of the more content we put on the grid, the more discoverability of that content is lead to a huge audience. So right now we're a top 50 website, and we're pretty happy in that space and would like to continue to grow.
So we'll talk about AOL and others in another segment. I mean, last question, given that 90% of the traffic comes from search, aren't you just wildly exposed to Google waking up one morning and saying, you know, we're going to tweak our search algorithm today, which obviously you're very familiar having worked there?
Yeah, no, that's something we think about. But I think the reality of anyone in the content business needs to realize search is the oxygen of the internet. And if Google wants to shut off that oxygen flow, we all have to be careful and respectful of that. But as a former Googler and someone who, I didn't walk out the door with the algorithm or anything, but I can say we create content that plays very well with Google, and we want to make sure that we would never do anything that would create a bad experience for the user, and therefore Google is going to penalize us. So, we don't want that oxygen source choked off. So we're definitely very mindful of creating content that's copyright protected, that's original, that's unique, and does not go against the rules of Google's search engine index.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.